Hello. Ahsoka never learned of Kenobi's outcome after Order 66. What if Ahsoka Tano found Obi Wan Kenobi? Would she believe she could bring him to the forefront of the galaxy, or would she continue on her journey without him? Would she learn of Luke and Leia, and if so, would she train them? Special thanks to Art Savers for sponsoring our 75,000 subscriber lightsaber giveaway. All the details are in the pinned comment down below. Our story begins at night. Tatooine was dark, and Ahsoka had recently landed on the planet. She remembered that Anakin had a family on the planet, and she negotiated with herself several times, and again, about coming here. Why would she even do this? There was no point to doing this, was there? To come here and be around sand, lots and lots of sand, to see someone who wasn't even blood related to Anakin? She decided against it, but arrived in the seas of sands at night. Walking along the canyons, she could feel something, a disturbance in the force. It wasn't necessarily light, and it wasn't necessarily dark. Maybe it was balance? Ahsoka could feel a sense of resolution. She came around the corner and saw a woman crying, standing over a rock. It was a weird sight to take in, but Ahsoka steadily approached, trying to see what was going on. Moments before she saw the woman, she heard the sound of a lightsaber deactivate. The woman was wearing Inquisitor clothing, but this was an odd sight. She had a dark cloak over what appeared to be Inquisitor clothing. Maybe Ahsoka was wrong. The woman's head jolted up when she saw Ahsoka from the corner of her eye. She stopped, both of them looking at each other, wondering who would make the first move. Ahsoka found this to be odd. The woman looked shocked to see her, which wasn't unlikely. Ahsoka was Anakin's Padawan, and all the Inquisitors were former Jedi, so they all knew who she was. Ahsoka steadily approached, and then she saw a little boy on the rock. She pondered if the kid had been killed. Ahsoka spoke up to the woman and asking who she was. She expressed that her name was Reva, but she didn't want any trouble. She just wanted to get the boy back to his aunt and uncle. This made Ahsoka question who the boy was, but instead she asked if the kid was alright, to which he was. The two of them started walking back to the homestead, and as they did, they started talking. Reva knew Ahsoka, but Ahsoka didn't know Reva. How could she? She was just a youngling when Ahsoka was last inside the Order. When the two of them got to the homestead, Ahsoka's heart dropped to her stomach. She looked at the back of a man. His head pointed away from her. He wore Jedi robes, but just by the stance, she knew exactly who it was. Reva placed Luke down on the ground. Obi-Wan turned around, looking into Ahsoka's eyes, and his heart lit with joy. Luke was alright, so the two of them ran up to each other and gently embraced in a tight hug. Obi-Wan couldn't be happier. Luke was seemingly alive, and so was Ahsoka. The two of them broke off with their delicate hug and looked at each other, both of their hands still lightly pressing the other's shoulders. They didn't want to let go. Old friends. Both assumed the other had died, and now they were here. The memory of what Obi-Wan had said on Mortis ran through their minds. If they could stay together, then nothing bad would happen to them. Obviously it had, because they didn't stay together. They looked over. Owen was picking up Luke and ushering the small boy back into the homestead. Obi-Wan told Ahsoka that he'd be back in a moment. He went over to Reva's side and told her that she was now free. Reva asked if she was as bad as him, if she had become him. These words could be heard to Ahsoka. The poor woman, clearly distraught, barely an adult and scared by something. Reva dropped her lightsaber with tears in her eyes. Obi-Wan reminded her that she was strong. The journey that she wanted for herself lay ahead of her. Reva appreciated the guidance of a true Jedi Master, the one that Obi-Wan had always been. Kenobi turned back to Ahsoka, and she had one question. Who is he? Obi-Wan didn't know it. He couldn't have suspected that Ahsoka would know, but maybe she did? Apparently not. Obi-Wan walked over to Ahsoka and put his hand on her shoulder with remorse and told her to come along. The two of them walked back to Obi-Wan's little cave, and the two of them sat down. Obi-Wan asked Ahsoka what she knew of the fall of the Republic. She simply talked about the inhibitor chips, of which Obi-Wan was not even privy to. She continued and mentioned the death of her friend Padme, on all the clones of the 501st, and the survival of Rex, and a couple of other things. She was regretful about the apparent death of Anakin Skywalker. When she said that she could almost see into Obi-Wan's mind, he reacted to those words and she asked what was wrong. He simply said that Anakin wasn't dead. Ahsoka looked at him with confusion and he continued, explaining the events of Nightfall, Mustafar, Mapuzo, and of course, the recent moon he was just on outside of Jabim. Ahsoka couldn't believe what she was hearing. When she asked about what had just occurred and learned the truth, she asked why he didn't stay or kill him or something. Obi-Wan looked over at Ahsoka and told her that it wasn't his mission to kill him. Anakin was dead, but maybe not forever. It just couldn't be Obi-Wan that brought him back. Maybe it was another one of the flaws that Kenobi made as a Jedi, or simply, he was just listening in his mind to what Qui-Gon said to him before he died, that Anakin was a chosen one, that he would bring balance in the Force. It was a mystery to Ahsoka, and Obi-Wan simply knew what he was thinking. But he wanted to get his mind off of it. So did Ahsoka. The knowledge that Anakin suffered for so long plagued her heart. She could almost hear his breathing apparatus, which went a long way for someone who never saw or met this Vader. She asked who the boy was, and Obi-Wan simply smiled and said that it was one of the twins. Skywalker twins to be exact. Ahsoka was shocked, and then the dots connected. They were Padme's children too. Obi-Wan explained it all out. Luke to Owen and Beru, and Leia to Bail and Brea. It was simple as an arrangement. Ahsoka tried to understand why he wasn't training Luke, and it was because Obi-Wan was simply to look out, a guardian if you will. He couldn't intervene because of Owen, he couldn't steal the child because that was unethical, so he would wait. Luke was like Anakin in so many ways, and much like his mother and others. He would come to him someday. Ahsoka beckoned the question of if he didn't. Obi-Wan expressed that the Force was always in motion, everything would be balanced again. His mission wasn't to bring such balance, rather, guide it to where it could be balanced. Ahsoka asked why Obi-Wan wouldn't leave Tatooine, and he explained the events of the past few days, and told her that he would be going to visit Bail. If she had any interest in joining him, she could. She agreed. In the morning, they arrived at Alderaan. Obi-Wan simply wasn't going to separate Leia from her droid, and while Obi-Wan and Leia were saying their goodbyes, Bail and Ahsoka regathered. They hadn't seen each other since Padme's funeral, and to see each other again was such a great joy. Bail was starting his rebellion, and he suggested Ahsoka join him on such endeavors. Ahsoka turned and looked at Obi-Wan and pondered over what she should do. Ahsoka was by no means going to do what Obi-Wan did, because she was herself, but she was curious as to what Obi-Wan planned on doing. Bail, seeing both Obi-Wan and Ahsoka, decided to invite them in to his palace and sit them down and talk for a short while, which Obi-Wan and Ahsoka were fine with. When they went in, Bail talked openly about everything he was doing to fund a rebellion, but there were problems with getting it off the ground. While there were groups of clones fighting against the Empire and rebel cells, there was one man they couldn't get a hold of, which was Saw Guerrera. The man was possessed with hate for the Empire, and while there was nothing inherently negative about doing so and hating a regime that poisons the free mind, it's how he went about hating them. The way he hated them was in a demeanor that put fear into those around the Empire, as well as people that didn't support the Empire. He was an insurrectionist, he caused terror around the galaxy, and because of that, the Empire used him as an example of what the rebellion was, when in reality what Bail wanted to do was establish an order that could only assist those around them. Ahsoka and Obi-Wan worked with Saw before, so they could certainly do it again. Obi-Wan was much more hesitant about this. He was about to say goodbye to the homestead and idle a little bit away from Luke so that he'd have time to grow. Obi-Wan would be leaving them unprotected again if he left Tatooine, but Ahsoka reassured him that they would be fine without him on the planet. Obi-Wan was unsure about that, but he trusted Ahsoka's judgment. They would soon leave Alderaan to Saw's most recent base. They were surprised to still find him there, and when the two former Jedi arrived, they were met with hostility, especially by Benthic, Saw's second-in-command. Though upon realizing they were Jedi, they were allowed to enter. The conversation with Saw, as expected, went pretty much nowhere. He was never the negotiator his sister was, and Ahsoka made sure he knew that, expressing that she would have never supported the terror he caused. Like Saw's tactics, putting Saw in a corner wouldn't do anything for him. Being hostile towards him would only make him more volatile. With no progress made, Ahsoka asked Obi-Wan if there were any other rebel cells, and he told her about the path. She suggested they go there. It would take time because they were hidden, as Saw's group was. After weeks, they'd find Roken and the path on Tatooine. It was a part of a much larger cell. Someone else was there, his name was Dodonna, but he was simply setting up and then abandoning. There was also a man by the name of Luthen, who was there as well. It was the beginning of something, but it was tiny. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka were a sight for sore eyes, especially as many people believed Vader killed Obi-Wan. While the Jedi were here, they couldn't do as much as they could assist, but trouble would loom on Tatooine. Black Chrysanthemum returned to Lars' homestead. A couple years before, he ran into Obi-Wan, and he was back for revenge. It didn't take long, but he destroyed the homestead, killed Beru and Luke, while taking Owen, still barely alive, back to Jabba's palace. He hoped that by doing so, he could garner favorability with the Hutt once again. It wouldn't work, and he'd be thrown to Jabba's pet Rancor for returning after destroying a moisture farm, decreasing the amount of people he could use his water tax on. Obi-Wan out on Tatooine would feel this, and tell Ahsoka they needed to go. When he eventually returned, he was heartbroken to learn of what had happened. He buried Luke and Beru next to Shmi Skywalker and the rest of the family that was present in the small gravesite. He never should have left, and he knew it. But now there was nothing he could do to change the past. Instead, he had two options: lobby for training Leia, or fight with the Path and the small rebellion. Ahsoka was upset as well, knowing that Luke was Anakin's kid at the time. She suggested that they bring Leia along with them so that they could both teach her the ways of the Force, but Obi-Wan knew that both Bail and Brea wouldn't agree to do that, especially not after Luke was dead. Maybe they'd be allowed to stay on Alderaan and do it? Ahsoka suggested an idea. She knew that Obi-Wan was influential. His role was incredibly important. People were inspired by his presence. He couldn't go away from the rebellion, they needed him, and it could possibly help bring more Jedi out of the woodworks. He understood that the future belonged to the Skywalker twins, and with one of them remaining, it belonged to Leia. So Ahsoka suggested that she go back to Alderaan, begin Leia's training, and then when there was downtime, he could come back and assist. It wasn't a terrible idea. People knew Obi-Wan really well, and having been a general during the Clone Wars, he could be of great assistance to Roken and the rest of them. During the split, Ahsoka would be permitted to train Leia in her own way, but it would also allow Obi-Wan to inspire Jedi. While he wasn't much inspiration for Nari, the poor soul who was caught by the Inquisitors on Tatooine, he could right those wrongs. He assisted everyone around him, and he was able to meet several Jedi survivors. There weren't more than 100 Jedi in the galaxy, but many of them found home on the path. He at one point ran into Cal Kestis, and at another he had an encounter with Kanan and Hera. While Cal was a bright young man, he at this point didn't exactly look like he was all too interested in the idea of joining a rebellion. Hera did, and Kanan followed along with her. Obi-Wan would bring Saw to the base and try and coax him a little bit more, calm him down, help him make friends, and not be so focused on killing every little thing that moved. It didn't work. On Alderaan, things were going much better. Similarly to how her brother would have adopted the Force, Leia caught on really quickly. However, the bond between her and Ahsoka wasn't anything like the bond between her and Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan and Leia both understood each other, where Leia didn't exactly get along with Ahsoka. It was the way that Ahsoka explained things that Leia didn't like. Obi-Wan explained the Force to her the way he would have to any youngling inside the Order. After all, he was a former council member, one of the best masters in the Jedi Order. Ahsoka had no formal training as a teacher or an instructor. If she was teaching a youngling or a Padawan, it might have been easier, because they had a grasp on the Force. Leia didn't. Whenever the swap would start, Ahsoka and Obi-Wan would essentially trade notes, informing the other of Leia's progress or the rebellion's progress, which was genuinely growing really well. With Obi-Wan's previously established bond with Leia, he'd be able to understand where Ahsoka was astray and pick up the pieces, but also inform Ahsoka where she needed to be more patient and explain simpler at. Years would pass by rather quickly, and before they knew it, more signs of a rebellion would pop up. On Lothal, a boy named Ezra Bridger would send out a message heard around the galaxy. On Ferrix and Aldhani, the same would be true. However, there was something that Kenobi wanted to investigate. At this point, Leia was actively helping in the rebellion, and so she was allowed to be with Ahsoka and Obi-Wan on the front lines, essentially. She obviously had to be careful, or it could endanger her father's job and life. Obi-Wan, on the other hand, had learned about a prison breakout on Niamos. He'd been to the planet before, and he was curious exactly what was being created there, so, being himself, he snuck onto an Imperial vessel all alone on Niamos. Ahsoka and Leia knew what he was doing. He also carried a transponder with him so that he could alert his allies to his location consistently. He would be baffled when he arrived at a space station the size of a moon. However, there was an issue. He could sense the presence of two similar and familiar essences. Vader was one of them, and the other one was Palpatine. While Kenobi wasn't exactly positive about the second one, he had to be careful. He surely would alert the two of them to his presence, which was true. Vader and Sidious knew he was here, and so Sidious told Vader to hunt him down and finally destroy him. Vader yearned for this moment. He'd been waiting for it for years, ever since he was embarrassed a second time by his former master on that rock. Obi-Wan, when he landed, vanished into the starship. The space station wasn't completed yet. Palpatine was here because he wanted to call Grand Moff Tarkin out on his ignorance on the plans. Because at this point, it was just a husk, but there were some working parts on it. Obi-Wan stopped in a hangar bay adjacent to the one he landed in, as a group of stormtroopers unloaded a shipment from Jeddah. What could be on Jeddah that the Empire wanted? And then Obi-Wan saw some containers. He could feel what resonated on the inside of them. They were kyber crystals. Obi-Wan locked onto these containers and followed them, which eventually led him to a core of some sorts. His attention on these crystals distracted him from what was behind him. When they got to the crystal room, which was in the heart of the Death Star, Vader jump-scared Obi-Wan for the second time. Kenobi leapt back, avoiding the strike narrowly. The stormtroopers who had just left came running back into the room. Obi-Wan threw them out of the room with the Force before igniting his own weapon to block Vader's aggressive strike. While Vader might have had a flair for the dramatics and scaring Obi-Wan, Kenobi recovered quickly, his blade defending him and the two of them spreading out evenly. Kenobi didn't have an intention of fighting Vader, but here he was. The two of them crossed blades with each other, trying to hit their mark, trying to disable the other, but they were at this point getting nowhere. Obi-Wan's strategy on the moon worked because he started in Form 3 and then a minute in he switched to Form 4. Vader at this time wouldn't fall for that. Kenobi steadied between Form 3 and Form 4, switching every couple moves to keep Vader off balance. Since Mustafar, Vader mastered Form 3 so that he couldn't be beat, and so that he could beat Obi-Wan when he found him again. That obviously didn't work last time. The two of them crossed blades at extreme speeds, not as fast as Mustafar, but as fast as metal and old could go. Kenobi got behind Vader and distanced himself, taking in the sight around him and hearing a door open. Behind him, it was Palpatine. The Sith Lord looked disapprovingly at Vader, expressing his dissatisfaction with Vader's inability to kill Obi-Wan, telling Vader that it's clear that Kenobi had a soft spot in the remnants of Anakin Skywalker. This enraged Vader even more, throwing his blade forward, but Obi-Wan sidestepped the hulking Sith Lord, cutting across his metal legs and watching him tumble. Sidious growled, telling Vader he'd finish this himself. Obi-Wan turned back just at the right moment and lifted his blade to block the electricity shooting from Sidious's hands. Vader got up as Sidious passed around him, shooting his full power into Kenobi's blade. Sidious had enough hate for Obi-Wan, taking away the perfect pupil and always staying around where he wasn't wanted. He monologued at Kenobi, but while this was happening, Obi-Wan had already renounced himself to the ways of the living. Vader got up and raised his lightsaber ready to strike down at Kenobi. Vader could hardly stand, but he needed Sidious's approval. He wouldn't get it. The moment Vader struck at Kenobi, the Jedi Master used his free hand and used all the strength he could to lift the largest kyber crystal in the room and flung it in front of him. Sidious saw it at the last second and panicked. Vader never saw it coming. Obi-Wan's cloak vanished in front of Sidious and the kyber crystal slammed down as Vader's blade and Sidious's lightning smashed into the crystal, creating a chain explosion that set off every kyber crystal in the Bay area, wiping out the two Sith Lords, but not just them, imploding and destroying the entire station. When Ahsoka on the Ghost arrived, she realized what Obi-Wan had done. Seeing the wreckage of the Death Star, she felt terrible pain in her heart. He was gone, but he took the Sith with him. The sacrifice that Obi-Wan had made would be heard around the galaxy, though it wouldn't be known that he made it. Rather, the Imperial lack of leadership, along with the destruction of the Death Star, would send ripples through the entire Empire. Without Sidious, the Imperial Senate would too implode, unable to sustain itself without a poisonous leader. While the rebellion hadn't been using its violence tendencies aside from Saul, the Empire turned its weapons on itself. This would lead the galaxy into a civil war. The rebels would thrive off of it. They would rise in the shadow of a fallen empire. The standing power in the galaxy would be Thrawn, but in a large conflict over Coruscant, the bridge of the Chimera would be breached by a stray bomber. That is, after the Inquisitorius mounted up a rebellion of their own against Thrawn, killing him and subsequently being killed in the battle. The fall of the Empire would come very swiftly. With Mon Mothma and Bail Organa alive, they'd be able to restructure a government after the Empire fell. Ahsoka would be left to make a choice in which she would decide to do, taking Kanan, Ezra, and Leia on a journey around the galaxy to lead them on a path of the Jedi. Ahsoka, while originally not wanting to heed the call, would take it, believing that she can instill a new sense of identity to the Jedi Order, which would have already been completed with Kanan Jarrus being one of them and still being in a relationship with Hera Syndulla. The Jedi would slowly unite, Cal Kestis joining their ranks and shortly after him, the aging Quinlan Vos. Yoda would surprisingly rejoin this order as well, but not as a Grand Master, rather as a guide, uniting both the past of the Jedi and the future of the Jedi, bringing with him a young face, one who would identify with Yoda, a kid named Grogu. He would have much to learn before he could be anything like the former Grand Master, but it was the future that sat right in front of him. With a republic being reborn in the core and a band of new talented Jedi resurfacing in the Mid-Rim, the future of the galaxy looked bright. Of course, only time would tell how long that would remain, especially without the influence of the Sith. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Again, special thanks to Galvin Gaming, Tristan, Darth Revan, Pimbidi Bane, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Mad Matty Studios, Anakin003, Jedi Sloth, Rex the Wolf, Flynn Vassis, Jack Miller, the man with 3 first names, Dark Saint 46, and Lord Deadwing for supporting the channel. Smash that like button if you want to support. Check out the Patreon, all the links are down below, and let's talk about our story real quick. This was a fun little story. I've done stories with Ahsoka in the past of this, I've done stories with Obi-Wan in this scenario and Ahsoka in this scenario, but I wanted to change it up. I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go with the death of the Sith, and I wanted to try and do something a little bit different and lead to what if Palpatine was on the Death Star, just kind of looking at it and being like, oh yeah, this is not what Tarkin promised me, so I don't really like it. And at this point, he's probably deciding between the Death Star and the TIE Defender project. And so if you need, I know there's that one comment out there, I know if you need inference to why Palpatine would be here, then it's because he's trying to decide between the TIE Defender and the Death Star. So he decides the TIE Defender, like he does in canon, and then it gets destroyed and chooses the Death Star. There you go. There's your inference. So aside from that little tidbit, this was like different, a little bit different. Obviously, killing off Luke, I know people aren't going to be too big of a fan of, and maybe including Reva, but I want the story to feel in canon. I want the story to feel a part of the universe and kind of pick up in a spot where people know where I'm talking about. I don't want to just pick a random year and you guys be thinking through the entire story, well, when is it? I picked a time period at the story where you know what age everyone is. Obi-Wan is 45 at this point, and Luke and Leia are both 10, so you guys kind of know where you're at, right? It's right after the fight with Obi-Wan and Vader on that moon, so we pick up right there. So anyways, I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.